The cruelest thing in the room was not the vampires, not the silver candles, not even the way every pair of ancient eyes followed Grace Miller like she had stepped into a place where humans were only supposed to serve and disappear. It was the chair, small, narrow, polished black, and placed 6 inches lower than every seat at the Blackwood family table. Grace noticed it the moment the butler opened the dining hall doors and announced her name in a voice so cold it barely sounded alive. Miss Grace Miller. The room turned. 27 faces, all pale, perfect, and still as portraits, looked at her borrowed cream dress, her worn flats, the little scratch on her wrist from the restaurant shift she had finished only 2 hours earlier. Outside, rain struck the tall windows of Blackwood Manor in long silver lines. Inside, the marble floor reflected chandeliers bright enough to make Grace feel exposed from every angle. She had been told this dinner was a thank you. 3 nights ago, a little vampire girl had collapsed in the back booth of the all-night restaurant where Grace worked. Everyone else had frozen, terrified of touching royal blood. Grace had not known anything about royal blood. She had only seen a child struggling to breathe, so she had moved. Fast, calm, human. She had cleared the table, called for help, and held the girl's small hand until the black cars arrived. One of the men in those cars had watched Grace with silver-gray eyes and a face so pale it looked carved from winter. He had not introduced himself. He had only said, "You saved someone my house failed to protect." Now she knew his name. Lucian Blackwood, Vampire King, CEO of Blackwood Holdings. A man whose family owned half the skyline of Chicago and enough old secrets to make the city feel young. Grace had almost refused the invitation, but the envelope had come with a handwritten note promising that no harm would come to her, and her younger brother Noah had begged her to go. Maybe rich vampires tip better than truckers, he had joked from the couch, wrapped in his faded hospital blanket. Grace had laughed because he needed her to. Then she put on the best dress she owned, took 2 buses across the city, and told herself dignity did not depend on where someone else told you to stand. But now she saw the chair. Evelyn Blackwood stood beside it, tall and elegant in a black velvet gown, her smile smooth enough to cut glass. "Miss Miller," she said, "how generous of you to join us. Since you touched royal blood without permission, the family has agreed to let you sit below the table. Consider it mercy." A few soft laughs moved through the room like smoke. Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse, the cheap one with the broken zipper she had tried to hide under her coat. The butler gestured toward the low chair. No one defended her. No one looked embarrassed. To them, this was order. Blood above blood. Name above name. Grace walked forward anyway. Every step echoed. She could feel the uneven hem of her dress brush her knees, feel the thin soles of her flats against the marble, feel the hunger she had ignored since lunch. She reached the small chair and stopped. For 1 second, she thought of turning around. She thought of Noah asleep under flickering apartment lights, of unpaid bills stacked beside the microwave, of the way poor people were always expected to swallow shame quietly because pride did not pay rent. Then she sat, not curled, not bent, not broken. She placed both hands in her lap and kept her back straight. Evelyn's smile faded just a little. "Comfortable?" she asked. Grace looked up at her. "I've sat through worse." The room went still. Not silent. Still. Like even the candles had stopped breathing. Then the double doors at the far end opened. Lucian Blackwood entered without announcement, and the temperature seemed to fall 10 degrees. He wore a black suit with no ornament except a silver ring on his left hand. His skin was white, but not like Grace's. Hers was human, warm under fear and rain. His was colder, almost porcelain, making his dark hair and silver eyes look impossibly sharp. Everyone rose. Grace started to rise too, but Evelyn rested 2 fingers on the back of the low chair. "No need," she murmured. "You are where you belong." Lucian heard her. Grace knew because his eyes moved. First to Evelyn, then to the chair, then to Grace. Something ancient crossed his face. Not anger. Something quieter. More dangerous. He did not speak. He walked to the head of the long table, where a high-backed chair waited for him like a throne. The family watched, relieved, expecting order to settle back into place. Lucian placed one hand on the chair. Then he pulled it backward. The legs scraped across marble with a sound that cut through the dining hall. Evelyn's expression cracked. "Your Majesty?" Lucian carried the chair himself. No servant touched it. No guard dared move. He crossed the length of the table, while every vampire in the room stared as if the old laws had started burning in front of them. Grace's heartbeat pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. He stopped beside her low chair, set his own chair down at the same angle, and sat beside her. Not above her. Not across from her. Beside her. Then he looked at Evelyn and said, softly, "If Mercy sits here, then so do I." The room did not go quiet. It froze. Evelyn's lips parted, but no sound came out. Around the table, centuries of pride seemed to tremble inside crystal glasses and silver knives. Grace turned toward Lucian, stunned. Up close, he looked even less human. Too still, too pale, too controlled. But his voice when he spoke again was meant only for her. "Miss Miller, did they offer you dinner before judgment?" Grace swallowed. No, his eyes darkened to storm gray. Then this family has forgotten the difference between tradition and cruelty. Evelyn recovered first, though her smile had become brittle. "Brother, this is only custom. A human who interferes with royal matters must be reminded of boundaries." Lucian did not look away from Grace. She crossed a boundary to save a child. Grace felt every eye return to her, no longer amused, no longer comfortable. The chair beneath her suddenly felt less like a punishment and more like the center of a storm. Lucian leaned back, his pale hand resting calmly on the armrest. "Serve her first," he ordered. The butler hesitated. Just a heartbeat. Lucian's gaze lifted. "Did I stutter?" The butler moved at once. A porcelain plate was placed before Grace, on a small side stand because the table was still too high for her chair. The humiliation should have deepened. Somehow it did not. Not with the vampire king sitting beside her, lowering himself to the level they had chosen for shame and turning it into command. Grace looked at the food, then at the family watching her like she had become a question they were afraid to answer. Her hands were steady now. She picked up the fork. "Thank you," she said. Lucian's mouth barely moved, almost a smile, almost a wound. "Do not thank me for sitting where I should have been all along." And in that moment, Grace understood this dinner had never been about gratitude. It was a test, not of her manners, not of her blood, of whether a room full of powerful creatures could recognize dignity when it arrived wearing worn shoes and carrying nothing but kindness. The Blackwood dining hall did not return to silence after that night. It evolved. Within hours of the vampire king sitting beside a human girl at the lowest chair of the table and turning humiliation into law, every house in the Western Dominion had received the same message. The old balance had shifted. Not broken. Shifted. Because when a king chose to descend instead of command, the structure of power did not collapse. It duplicated itself somewhere else. Far beyond Chicago, where the Blackwood lineage ruled through ancient court tradition, another system had already been stirring beneath modern glass towers and corporate empires. In Vancouver, where rain never seemed to leave the sky for long, the Black Dominion Council met in silence beneath a building that did not appear on any map. The council chamber was circular, made of dark stone that absorbed light instead of reflecting it, and every seat was already filled. "The Blackwood event has destabilized precedent hierarchy," one of the elders said flatly. His voice carried the weight of centuries, but there was something underneath it now, unease. "A vampire king does not sit beside a human under any known code of law." "And yet he did," another replied. The projection at the center of the room flickered, revealing an image frozen in time. Lucian Blackwood, moving his chair across marble, stopping beside a girl in a worn dress. The image alone was enough to silence the room again, because what followed it was worse than rebellion. It was influence. The human was not of noble blood, the first elder continued. No lineage, no council registration, no recorded pact, yet the mark of mercy activated in her presence. A pause. Then a second voice, lower now. "That should not be possible under Blackwood law." "It is not Blackwood law," said the woman seated at the far end of the table, her eyes reflecting faint violet light. "It is older." That single word changed the temperature of the room. Older laws were not written. They were remembered. And anything remembered was never truly dead. At that same moment, across the city in a different estate that belonged to no known house, a second chamber awakened. Its doors opened without being touched. Inside, a young vampire attendant stepped forward quickly, bowing his head. The second signal has activated, he said. Location confirmed. A figure in the shadows finally moved. Not a king, not a council elder. Something in between. So it has begun, the voice said quietly. 2 marks. 2 humans. 2 courts reacting. He stepped forward just enough for the dim light to catch his face. Pale, controlled, unreadable. Blackwood thinks this is about dignity, he continued. But dignity is only the surface response. The soul mark does not appear for kindness alone. The attendant hesitated. Then why does it appear? A long silence followed. Outside the chamber, rain struck glass in slow, rhythmic pulses like a heartbeat the city could not escape. Finally, the figure answered. Because something buried beneath both courts is waking up again. Back in Chicago, Lucian Blackwood stood alone in the corridor outside the dining hall long after Grace had been escorted away. The laughter, the judgment, the centuries-old arrogance, it had all gone quiet. But silence did not mean peace. It meant recalibration. He looked down at his hand. The faint residue of ancient law still lingered where he had moved his chair. A decision that should not have mattered. Yet it changed everything. You didn't just sit beside her, a voice said behind him. Evelyn Blackwood. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes were sharp. You shifted the interpretation of the entire court structure. Lucian did not turn. No, he said quietly. I corrected it. At the cost of stability? She asked. Or at the cost of control? He finally looked at her then, and the air seemed to tighten. Control over what does not deserve to stand above kindness is not stability, he replied. It is decay pretending to be tradition. Evelyn did not answer. Because somewhere deep within the architecture of the Blackwood estate, something old had already responded to his action. Not alarm, recognition. And in that recognition, the world of vampire courts began to split, not into chaos, but into alignment. One side that still believed power justified hierarchy, and another that had just begun to remember that even power could choose to sit beside something it once called beneath it. Far away, across oceans and unseen territories, the second girl, Mia Hayes, would soon become the next point of convergence. Not because she was chosen, but because the system had already begun correcting itself around her existence. Mia did not sleep that night. The guest room inside Adrian Black's estate was larger than the entire apartment she used to share with her mother, but every inch of it felt borrowed. The ceiling rose high above her like a chapel. Rain tapped against the tall windows. Somewhere beyond the glass, the city lights of Vancouver blurred beneath the storm, soft and distant, as if the human world had already begun slipping away from her. She sat on the edge of the bed in the clean cotton dress the servants had given her, staring at the golden mark in her palm. It no longer burned. That almost frightened her more. The symbol rested under her skin like it had always belonged there, delicate lines curling around each other in an ancient pattern she could not read. Every few minutes, it pulsed once. Not painfully, not loudly, just enough to remind her that something inside her life had changed without asking her permission. Across the hall, she heard low voices. Vampire voices. Too smooth. Too calm. Too controlled. One of them belonged to Counselor Thorne. She recognized the sharpness of it even through the heavy door. The girl cannot remain unexamined. A human soul mark bearer has not appeared in 300 years. If Black refuses council custody, the other houses will consider it a challenge. Then came Adrian's voice, colder than the rain. Let them consider carefully. Mia held her breath. Silence followed. Then Thorne spoke again, softer, more dangerous because of it. You are not thinking like a king. You are thinking like a man who has been alone too long. The hallway went still. Even the rain seemed to pause. When Adrian answered, his voice was quiet enough that Mia almost missed it. Leave before I forget my manners. Footsteps retreated. A door closed. Mia pressed her marked hand against her chest, trying to steady the wild rhythm there. She should have been angry. She was angry. At being taken from the ballroom. At being spoken about like evidence. At having no one ask whether she wanted any of this. But beneath the fear was something worse. Curiosity. Because when Adrian had stood between her and the council, the entire room had obeyed. Not because he shouted. Not because he threatened. Because power moved around him like gravity. And still, when he looked at her bleeding hand, she had seen fear in his eyes. Not fear of her. Fear for her. A soft knock touched the door. Mia stood too quickly, nearly tripping over the hem of the dress. Who is it? Adrian Black opened the door only halfway. He had changed out of his stained suit into a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. The matching mark on his wrist glowed faintly gold. In the dim light, he looked less like a CEO and more like something carved from old winter. I brought tea, he said. Mia blinked. Of all the things she expected from a vampire king, a porcelain cup on a silver tray was not one of them. I thought vampires did not make tea. One corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. We are old, Miss Hayes. Not useless. Her fingers tightened around the doorframe. You know my last name. I know the name written on the emergency contact form from the catering company. I know you. Worked 17 hours yesterday. I know you live in a studio apartment near East Hastings. I know your rent is overdue by 9 days. Her face went hot. That is private. Yes, he said. And I apologize. The simple answer disarmed her more than any command could have. He lowered his gaze to the tray. I needed to know who the council might try to use against you. Mia looked at the tea, then at him. Why are they so afraid of me? Adrian did not answer right away. He stepped back, giving her space instead of entering. That small courtesy made her throat tighten. Because the soul mark does not choose decoration. It chooses correction. Mia frowned. Correction of what? His eyes lifted to hers, silver in the darkness. A king who has ruled too long without mercy. A court that has forgotten humans are not beneath them. A bloodline curse no physician has been able to break. The mark in Mia's palm pulsed again, brighter this time. Down the corridor, something answered. A bell. Small. Silver. Urgent. Adrian turned so fast the air shifted. What is that? Mia whispered. His expression changed, the cold mask cracking for one impossible second. My son's chamber. He has not rung that bell in 27 years. Before Mia could speak, the mark in her palm opened like sunrise beneath her skin, and from somewhere deep inside the estate, a child's voice called one word she had never heard before, yet somehow understood perfectly. Mother. Adrian went still. Mia felt the entire house listening. And in that breathless silence, she realized the mark had not brought her to the king first. It had brought her to the child who had been waiting for her. The hallway outside Mia's room changed before she took a single step. Lamps hidden behind frosted glass flickered to life one by one, stretching a path of pale gold through the estate. Doors unlocked somewhere far below. Quiet mechanisms turned inside the walls. The house itself seemed to wake, not like a machine, but like an ancient creature recognizing a voice it had missed. Adrian moved first. Not running. Kings did not run. But the distance vanished beneath his stride so quickly Mia had to hurry to keep up. Her bare feet whispered over black marble. The hem of the cotton dress brushed her ankles. The mark in her palm glowed brighter with every step, warm now, almost gentle, as if guiding her down the corridor. Who called me that? She asked, though her voice came out thin. Adrian did not look back. My son. Your son has been awake all this time. No. The answer was immediate. Heavy. Daniel has breathed. He has dreamed. He has suffered quietly. But he has not spoken since the night the curse took him. Mia slowed for half a second. 27 years. A child trapped in silence longer than she had been alive. The thought pressed against her ribs. Then the silver bell rang again. One clear note. Desperate. Adrian's control cracked. He turned a corner, so sharply the shadows recoiled from him. 2 guards stationed before a pair of carved oak doors stepped aside without being told. Their eyes dropped to Mia's glowing palm. One of them whispered something in a language she did not know. The other crossed himself like he had seen a miracle or a warning. Adrian pushed the doors open. The chamber beyond was not what Mia expected. No throne. No cold laboratory. No frightening altar. It was a child's room made too beautiful by grief. Shelves lined with untouched wooden toys. A painted ceiling of stars. A small train set resting in the middle of a carpet patterned with moons. Everything preserved with painful care, as if time had been asked politely to stop and had obeyed. At the center stood a narrow bed beneath white curtains. A boy sat upright against the pillows. He looked about 9 years old, with dark hair rumpled from sleep and skin pale as candle wax. His eyes were open, not fully, not strongly, but open. They were gray like Adrian's, except softer, clouded with years of silence and pain no child should carry. Beside him, a silver bell trembled in one small hand. Adrian stopped in the doorway. For one breath, The most powerful man Mia had ever seen looked utterly helpless. Daniel, he whispered. The boy did not look at him. His gaze found Mia. The mark in her palm answered with a soft pulse. Daniel's lips parted. Mother. The word was faint, cracked from disuse, but it filled the room like thunder. Mia's throat closed. I am not your mother, sweetheart. I am sorry. I think you are confused. The boy's small fingers tightened around the bell. Not body mother, he whispered. Mark mother. Behind her, someone gasped. Mia turned. 3 people had gathered in the hall. Counselor Thorne, Lady Seraphine, and an elderly woman in a silver shawl whose face was carved with shock. Adrian's voice cut through the room. Leave. The elderly woman stepped forward instead. My king. That child just used the old title. The nurse title from before the first covenant. Adrian's jaw tightened. I said leave. No, Mia said. The word came out before she could measure it. Every vampire looked at her. Even Adrian. She should have folded under those immortal stares. She did not. If this is about him, then stop talking over him. He is awake. Ask him what he needs. Silence fell. Long, sharp. Then Daniel lifted one trembling hand toward Mia. Please, he said. It hurts when they are angry. Something inside Adrian changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But Mia saw it. The power in the room drew inward, contained, as if he had suddenly remembered his strength could frighten the child he loved. He stepped back. The air warmed by a degree. Mia moved slowly toward the bed. No one stopped her. With every step, the mark glowed brighter, casting gold across the white sheets. She sat on the edge of the mattress, careful to leave space. Hi, Daniel, she said softly. My name is Mia. I do not know what is happening, but I am not going to hurt you. The boy studied her face. Then he looked at her hand. The gold symbol shimmered beneath her skin. He reached for it, hesitated, and glanced at Adrian. The king gave one slow nod. Daniel placed 2 fingers over Mia's palm. The room filled with light. Not blinding, not harsh. Warm, like sunrise through kitchen curtains. Mia saw flashes she did not understand. A child crying without sound. A woman singing beside a cradle. Adrian standing alone in the rain outside a locked nursery. A black seal wrapped around Daniel's voice like a ribbon made of shadow. Then the light faded. Daniel sagged against the pillows, exhausted but breathing easier. Mia steadied him by instinct. Adrian was at the bedside in an instant, his hand hovering near his son's shoulder, afraid to touch too hard. What did you see? He asked. Mia looked at the boy, then at the council members waiting beyond the door with hungry eyes. She understood one thing with sudden, icy clarity. Daniel's curse was not only old magic. It was a secret someone had protected. Someone inside this house. She covered Daniel's small hand with her own and lifted her chin. I saw a lock, she said, and I think someone here still has the key. Adrian did not move for several seconds. The room waited with him. Even the rain against the windows seemed careful. Mia kept Daniel's hand covered beneath hers, feeling the fragile warmth of his fingers and the faint pulse of the golden mark between them. Across the room, Counselor Thorne's expression had gone perfectly blank. Lady Seraphine looked offended, but not surprised enough. The elderly woman in the silver shawl pressed one hand to her mouth, as if she had been praying for this moment and fearing it at the same time. Adrian turned slowly. When he spoke, his voice was calm. That calm frightened everyone more than anger would have. Close the doors. The guards obeyed. The heavy oak doors shut with a deep sound that rolled through the nursery like distant thunder. No one leaves this room until my son tells me who hurt him. Daniel's eyes filled with panic. Not tears. Not exactly. More like the memory of tears, trapped behind 27 years of silence. Mia felt his fingers tighten around hers. She leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he would hear softness first. You do not have to say everything at once. Just start with one small truth. Daniel looked at Adrian, then at Thorne. The bell in his other hand trembled so hard it gave a tiny broken ring. Adrian heard it. His gaze shifted to the silver bell. He walked to the bed and knelt. The vampire king, ruler of houses older than nations, knelt beside a child's bed without hesitation. Daniel, he said, and all the steel had left his voice. I failed to hear you before. I will not fail again. That did something. Not to the room. To the boy. Daniel breathed in, shallow and shaking, then lifted his hand toward the painted ceiling of stars. She sang. He whispered. Mia followed his gaze. On the ceiling, golden constellations formed a crown above a crescent moon. Who sang? Mia asked. The night nurse. Adrian went still. We had no night nurse. Daniel blinked at him. Yes, you did. She smelled like winter roses. The elderly woman in the silver shawl made a wounded sound. Adrian turned to her. Mother? The woman steadied herself against the wall. Her name was Evelyn. I hired her for 1 week after the queen died. You were drowning in grief, Adrian. Daniel would not sleep. I thought a gentle nurse might help. I dismissed her after 3 nights. She asked too many questions about the bloodline vault. Thorne's voice sliced in. This is sentimental nonsense. A child waking from a curse may confuse dreams with memory. Mia looked at him. Then why do you sound afraid of his memory? The air sharpened. Lady Seraphine smiled without warmth. Careful, waitress. You are standing in a royal nursery, not serving coffee in some late-night diner. Mia felt the old shame rise, familiar as worn shoes and overdue bills. Then Daniel shifted closer to her. One tiny movement. One clear choice. The shame burned away. Maybe that is why I can see what you cannot, Mia said. When people ignore the person cleaning the table, she hears everything they thought was safe to say. Adrian's eyes flickered, not with warning, but with something like respect. Daniel's voice came again, faint but steadier. She wore a key. Black stone. Silver chain. She touched it to my throat when she sang. Then I could not call father anymore. The mark in Mia's palm flashed. A picture bloomed in her mind. Not a full memory. A hallway. A woman in gray. A pendant shaped like a key, dark as midnight, glowing with a thin silver edge. And behind her, just for a second, a man's sleeve embroidered with a thorned crest. Mia looked at Counselor Thorne. His face did not change. That was how she knew. Adrian stood. Slowly, carefully. The room darkened around him, not because the lamps failed, but because his power had filled the space between every breath. Thorne, he said. The counselor gave a thin laugh. My king, surely you do. Not intend to believe a human girl who has been in your house for less than an hour. I believe my son. Adrian stepped closer. And I believe the mark chose her because the rest of us became too blind to see betrayal standing beside the crib. Thorne's composure cracked for one heartbeat. Just one. But vampires noticed heartbeats. Adrian noticed everything. Lady Seraphine backed away from him. The elderly queen whispered a prayer in a language older than English. Daniel began to shake. Mia placed her free hand gently over his shoulder. Do not look at them, she said. Look at me. Count the stars on the ceiling. 1, 2, 3. His breathing followed hers. Adrian saw it. The way his cursed son calmed for a poor waitress when royal physicians had failed for decades. Something in his face softened, then hardened again into purpose. Guard the child, he ordered. Then to Mia, quieter. Stay with him. Please. That last word changed the room. Kings commanded. Adrian Black had asked. Mia nodded once. Adrian turned back to Thorne, but before he could speak, the nursery windows burst open from the force of the storm. Wind rushed in, scattering the white curtains. The golden mark in Mia's palm flared painfully bright. Daniel cried out, not in pain, but warning. She is here, he whispered. Mia looked toward the balcony. A woman in a gray coat stood beyond the glass, untouched by rain, a black stone key hanging from her neck. Her eyes found Mia first. Then she smiled like someone returning to collect what had never belonged to her. Evelyn did not enter through the broken window. She simply stood on the balcony while the storm moved around her, rain bending away from her gray coat, as if the sky itself knew better than to touch her. The black stone key at her throat pulsed once. Daniel whimpered. Mia felt the sound through his small hand before she heard it with her ears. Adrian moved between the balcony and the bed so quickly the candles along the wall bent sideways. Behind him, guards formed a silent line. Counselor Thorne stayed near the nursery door, too still, too quiet, as if he had become part of the furniture. Lady Seraphine looked from Thorne to Evelyn, and for the first time since Mia had met her, the noblewoman looked uncertain. Evelyn's smile widened. After all these years, she said softly, this is the girl? A tired little server in a borrowed dress? The soulmark must have grown sentimental. Adrian's voice came low. You will speak one more sentence with respect in my son's room, or you will not speak here at all. Evelyn tilted her head. Still protective. Still late. The words struck the room harder than thunder. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he did not look away. Mia saw the trap in Evelyn's tone. It was not meant to threaten him. It was meant to wound him, to pull the king out of the father. Mia leaned closer to Daniel. "Keep counting the stars," she whispered. "Do not listen to the storm." Daniel nodded against the pillow. 4, he breathed. 5, 6. The golden mark in Mia's palm warmed, answering his effort. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward their joined hands. "There it is," she murmured. "The borrowed door." Thorn finally spoke. "Enough theater. You were told never to return to this house." Evelyn laughed softly. "And you were told never to stand near a cursed child when truth was waking." His face hardened. Adrian turned slightly. "Explain." Thorn lifted his chin. "She is a discharged servant with a talent for old tricks. Nothing more." "No," Daniel whispered. The whole room heard him. His voice was weak, but it did not disappear. Mia straightened beside him. "Say what you remember, sweetheart. No one here gets to make your truth smaller." Daniel swallowed. She sang. "The key drank my voice." Thorn watched. A silence fell so deep it seemed older than the house. Adrian did not explode. That was what made it terrifying. His eyes went from silver to a dark, burning red, and every lamp in the nursery dimmed. Thorn took one step back. "My king, the child is frightened. He is inventing shapes from nightmares." Daniel's hand shook in Mia's grip. Mia stood, slowly, keeping herself between the boy and the adults who had turned his pain into politics. "He is not inventing anything," she said. "I saw your crest in his memory." Thorn branches stitched in silver on a black sleeve. Thorn's stare snapped to her. "You saw what the mark wanted you to see." "Maybe," Mia said. "Or maybe the mark chose someone you would underestimate." The air changed. Not because Mia had power, because she did not lower her eyes. She was still barefoot, still in a borrowed dress, still a woman who had counted tips under fluorescent diner lights and worried over 9 days of late rent. Yet in that royal nursery, with ancient vampires watching her like a candle in a storm, she spoke as if dignity were a crown no one could take. Evelyn lifted the black key. The metal chain whispered against her coat. The curse was never meant to last this long. Thorn promised 10 years. 10 years to keep the prince silent while the council adjusted succession laws. Adrian turned fully toward Thorn. Succession laws? Thorn's mask vanished piece by piece. In its place was something cold, exhausted, and bitter. "You were grieving. Unstable. The houses feared what your weakness would cost us." A silent air bought time. "A sleeping prince preserved order." "Preserved order?" Adrian repeated. Each word sounded carved from ice. "You stole my son's voice to protect a throne that already belonged to him." Thorn's mouth tightened. "I protected the kingdom from a king who loved one child more than his people." The red in Adrian's eyes brightened. For one dangerous second, Mia thought the room itself might crack. Then Daniel whispered, "Father." One word. Small. Frightened. Alive. Adrian stopped. The power drew back at once. Not gone. Controlled. Contained for the child watching him. He looked at Daniel, and the fury in his face broke into something far more painful. "I am here." Daniel reached for him with his free hand. Adrian crossed the room and took it as if touching a holy relic. Evelyn's expression faltered. The black key dimmed. Mia saw it. The curse weakened when Daniel was heard. Not when magic fought magic. When love answered. She looked at Adrian. "Ask him to speak again." Adrian understood without being told twice. "Daniel," he said, voice rough but gentle, "tell me what you want." Daniel's lower lip trembled. "I want the song gone." The mark in Mia's palm opened with a burst of gold. The black key at Evelyn's neck cracked down the center, not loudly, but with a tiny sound like ice giving way under spring sunlight. Evelyn gasped. Thorn lunged toward the door, but the guards were already there, blocking him without a single word. The curse unraveled in the air as silver dust, harmless and fading before it touched the carpet. Daniel inhaled. Deeply. Fully. For the first time in 27 years, the room heard the prince breathe without pain. Adrian bowed his head over his son's hand. Mia looked away to give him that private mercy. But Daniel did not let go of her. Neither did Adrian. And as dawn began to pale the edge of the storm outside, every vampire in that nursery understood the same impossible truth. A poor human waitress had not entered their world by accident. She had become the voice that old power could no longer silence. By the time dawn touched the windows, the storm had thinned into silver rain. The nursery no longer felt frozen in grief. It felt awake. Daniel slept again, but this time his sleep was different. His chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm. His fingers rested loosely against the blanket, no longer curled around the silver bell like it was the only voice he had left. Mia sat beside him in the chair Adrian had brought without asking. Her eyes burned from exhaustion. Her borrowed dress was wrinkled. Her hair had come loose around her face. Still, she did not move away from the bed. Every time she tried, Daniel stirred, and the golden mark in her palm gave one soft warning pulse, as if the bond itself knew the child had been left alone too many times. Adrian stood near the window, watching the guards escort Counselor Thorne across the courtyard below. There were no chains, no spectacle, no violent display of power, only 4 silent guards, the gray morning, and a kingdom beginning to understand that its old order had cracked without a sword being drawn. Evelyn had been taken to the Eastern Tower under guard. Lady Seraphine had not spoken since the curse broke. The Queen Mother had stayed long enough to kiss Daniel's forehead, then left the room, crying quietly into her silver shawl. Mia had pretended not to notice. Some grief deserved privacy. Adrian turned from the window. "You should rest." Mia let out a tired breath that almost became a laugh. People keep saying that in this house as if rest is something you can command into existence. A faint shadow of amusement crossed his face. "I have commanded less cooperative things." "I believe that," she said. Then her gaze dropped to Daniel. "But I am not tired enough to leave him alone." Adrian looked at his son, and the sharp edges of him softened again. "He has a full royal guard outside the door." "He had a full royal guard for 27 years, Mia said gently. That did not save his voice. The truth landed quietly. Adrian accepted it without pride getting in the way. That made him more dangerous in a different way, Mia realized. Not because he could rule, because he could learn. He walked to the opposite side of the bed and sat in the chair there, keeping Daniel between them like a fragile bridge. For several moments, neither spoke. The only sounds were the rain, the child breathing, and the distant murmur of a house that had survived a betrayal before breakfast. Finally, Adrian said, "When his mother died, Daniel stopped laughing first. Then he stopped eating unless I sat beside him. Then the nightmares began. I thought grief was swallowing him. I did not know someone had put a curse where comfort should have been." Mia watched his hand hover near Daniel's blanket, not touching until he was certain he would not wake him. "You were grieving too. That does not excuse blindness." "No," she said, "but it explains why cruel people knew where to hide the knife." Adrian's eyes lifted to her. There was old pain in them, and something newer. Trust, perhaps, or the first dangerous beginning of it. "You speak very honestly to kings." "I spent years smiling at customers who thought a $2 tip gave them permission to look through me," Mia said. "I am done making powerful people comfortable when children are hurting." The corner of his mouth moved. Daniel shifted in his sleep and murmured something small. Both of them leaned in at once. Mia first. Adrian half a breath after. The boy whispered again, clearer this time. "Pancakes." Mia froze. Then she looked at Adrian. "Pancakes?" Adrian stared at his sleeping son as if the child had recited an ancient prophecy. He used to ask for blueberry pancakes every Sunday. Before. He stopped, because the before did not need more words. Mia smiled despite the ache in her chest. "Then when he wakes up, he gets pancakes." Adrian blinked once. "The royal physician may object." "Is the royal physician going to argue with the woman who helped break a 27-year curse?" Adrian studied her. "No. I suspect he values his employment." For the first time all night, Mia laughed. It was quiet, rough with exhaustion, but real. Daniel stirred at the sound, and the faintest smile touched his sleeping face. Adrian saw it. The room changed around that smile. Not with magic, with hope. Then a knock came at the nursery door. 3 careful taps. A guard entered and bowed low. "My king, the council has gathered in the lower hall. They demand to know what will be done with the human soulmark bearer." Mia's smile faded. Adrian stood, and the king returned to his posture like a cloak settling over his shoulders. "What will be done with her?" he repeated softly. The guard lowered his eyes. "Those were their words, my king." Mia rose too, slower than him, but no less certain. The golden mark in her palm glowed as her hand left the arm of the chair. Adrian looked at it, then at her. "You do not have to face them." "Yes, I do," Mia said. "Because if I stay hidden in this room, they will keep calling me a thing that happened to your bloodline instead of a person who made a choice." Adrian was silent for one heartbeat. Then he inclined his head, not as a ruler to a servant, but as one equal recognizing another. Very well, but you do not walk behind me. Mia looked toward Daniel one last time. The boy slept beneath painted stars, breathing freely for the first morning in 27 years. Then she turned back to the Vampire King. Where do I walk? Adrian opened the nursery door, and the corridor beyond filled with waiting guards, bowed heads, and whispers that died the moment they saw her. Beside me, he said. The mark warmed in Mia's palm as she stepped into the hall. Below them, the council waited to judge a poor waitress. They did not yet understand she was coming to judge them back. The lower hall of Black Estate had been built for kings who expected obedience. Its ceiling rose nearly 40 feet above polished black stone. Tall windows looked out over the waking city, where Vancouver's glass towers caught the first pale streaks of morning. Along the walls, portraits of ancient vampire rulers watched with painted eyes, each one colder than the last. Mia felt every stare as she entered beside Adrian. Not behind him, beside him. That small difference moved through the room like a match dropped into dry paper. Whispers began, sharp and fast, then died when Adrian reached the center of the hall. 27 council members stood in a half circle, dressed in black, silver, crimson, and deep blue. Some looked furious. Some looked afraid. Most looked at Mia's bare feet before they looked at her face. She almost smiled at that. They could measure bloodlines, houses, fortunes, and centuries, but they still did not know how to measure a woman who had spent her life standing through 12-hour shifts and still found the strength to be kind. Lady Seraphine stepped forward first. Her gown shimmered like midnight water. My king, with respect, the human must be placed under council protection until the nature of her bond is determined. Adrian's expression did not change. Protection is an interesting word from people who failed to notice my son's curse for 27 years. A ripple of discomfort crossed the room. Seraphine's mouth tightened. The council was deceived by Thorn as you were. Then perhaps the council should learn humility before it offers custody of anyone. Mia heard the quiet inhale from the vampires nearest them. Humility was not a word that belonged naturally in this hall. Another councilman, older and narrow-faced, lifted his chin. The soulmark is not a private matter. If this human has influence over the prince, she has influence over succession. She must be tested. Mia felt Adrian's power shift beside her. Before he could answer, she spoke. I have a name. The councilman looked at her as if the marble floor had addressed him. Excuse me? My name is Mia Hayes. Not the human. Not the soulmark bearer. Not the waitress, unless you were planning to tip me for standing here before breakfast. A few guards lowered their eyes quickly. One of them might have been hiding a smile. The council did not smile. Seraphine's gaze sharpened. You are bold for someone who understands nothing of our laws. Mia held up her marked palm. The gold symbol glowed softly beneath her skin. You are right. I do not understand all your laws. But I understand a child asking for help. I understand adults choosing silence because truth is inconvenient. And I understand what it feels like when powerful people discuss your life like you are not standing in the room. No one spoke. Mia's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat, but her voice stayed steady. Last night, Daniel asked to be heard. That was the first law that mattered. Adrian turned his head slightly toward her. The look in his eyes was unreadable to the council, but Mia saw it. Quiet pride. The older councilman recovered first. Sentiment cannot govern an immortal nation. Neither can cowardice, Adrian said. The hall went cold. He took one step forward, and every vampire straightened. Councillor Thorn has confessed enough through his panic, his associates, and the curse key recovered from Evelyn's possession. A formal inquiry will begin tonight. Until then, every council vote passed during Daniel's silence is suspended. The reaction was immediate. Voices rose. Some shocked, some outraged, some afraid for very specific reasons. Seraphine went pale. You cannot suspend 27 years of law. I can, Adrian said. And I have. A younger councilwoman with copper hair stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Mia. What of her? If she can wake cursed blood, she is not ordinary. She may be a danger. Mia expected Adrian to answer. Instead, a smaller voice came from the top of the stairs. She is not a danger. The entire hall turned. Daniel stood on the landing in a blue robe too large for his thin frame, one hand gripping the banister, the other held by the Queen Mother. His face was pale. His legs trembled. But his eyes were open, clear, and fixed on the council below. Adrian moved half a step before stopping himself. Father and King Ward inside him. Mia saw the effort it took to let Daniel speak. The boy drew a careful breath. She heard me when all of you were arguing. She told them to ask what I needed. His voice shook, but it held. If that is danger, then this kingdom needs more of it. Something passed through the hall then. Too old to be applause, too sacred to be approval. One by one, heads bowed. Not all. Not Seraphine's. But enough. The Queen Mother guided Daniel down the stairs slowly. Adrian met them halfway, his hand hovering near his son's back without taking away his courage. Daniel looked at Mia. Pancakes? He asked softly. The word landed in the hall like sunlight breaking through old curtains. Mia smiled. Absolutely. Adrian looked from his son to the council, and his voice carried to every corner. This session is over. My son will eat breakfast. For once, no one argued. As they left the hall together, Mia felt the mark pulse once, then settle. Behind them, portraits of old kings watched in silence. Ahead of them, Daniel walked toward a morning he was never supposed to have. And beside her, Adrian Black looked less like a ruler who had found a weapon, and more like a father who had finally found his way home. Breakfast should have been impossible. A vampire prince who had not spoken in 27 years sat at a sunlit kitchen table, wearing a blue robe, eating blueberry pancakes cut into careful squares by the most powerful vampire king in North America. Mia stood near the counter with a mug of coffee warming her hands, watching Daniel take his first bite as if the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. The estate kitchen was not like the rest of the house. It had copper pans, white tile, a wide farmhouse sink, and windows that looked out over rain-washed gardens. It smelled of butter, maple syrup, and something gentle enough to make Mia's chest ache. Daniel chewed slowly. Adrian watched without blinking. The Queen Mother pretended to read the newspaper upside down. Finally, Daniel swallowed. Too much blueberry, he whispered. Adrian froze. The cook made a tiny sound behind her apron. Mia pressed her lips together, trying not to smile. Too much blueberry. Adrian repeated, like the words required a royal translation. Daniel nodded solemnly. I like plain better. The Queen Mother lowered the newspaper. You loved blueberry pancakes when you were small. Daniel looked at her with the brutal honesty only children could manage. I was small 27 years ago. Mia laughed first. A soft, startled sound. Then the Queen Mother laughed too, covering her mouth with one hand. Even the cook turned toward the stove, shoulders shaking. Adrian did not laugh. Not at first. He looked at his son with something raw and unguarded in his eyes, as if every ordinary complaint was a treasure dragged from the bottom of a frozen lake. Then his mouth curved. Just slightly. Plain pancakes, he said. Immediately. Daniel smiled. Not much, but enough to change the morning. For a while, the world stayed simple. Pancakes. Coffee. Rain on glass. A child learning the shape of his own voice again. Mia let herself breathe inside it. She knew it could not last, but she took it anyway. Poor girls learn to collect warm moments quickly, before life remembered to charge them for it. After breakfast, the physician examined Daniel in the small sitting room beside the kitchen. No frightening tools. No hovering nobles. Just a stethoscope, a notebook, and Adrian standing close enough to catch his son if his knees weakened. Mia waited in the hallway, her borrowed shoes now properly on her feet, though they pinched at the toes. The golden mark in her palm had dimmed to a soft outline. She rubbed her thumb over it and wondered whether her old life would recognize her if she tried to return to it. Her phone had been returned that morning. 17 missed calls from the catering company. 3 from her landlord. 1 from a number she knew too well and refused to open. Reality was still waiting outside the gates. Rent. Work. Debt. Fear. A past that did not disappear just because a king offered tea in the middle of the night. Adrian found her staring at the screen. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his gaze dropped to the missed calls. Your employer? Former employer, probably. I vanished from a charity event, ruined a $3,000 bottle of wine, and got taken away by vampires. That usually looks bad. On a time card. I will handle the catering company. Mia lifted her eyes. No. His brow faintly tightened. No. You do not get to handle my entire life because your world crashed into it. The words came sharper than she intended, but she did not take them back. Adrian studied her for a long second. Then he nodded. You are right. Mia blinked. That was not the argument she expected. I am. I have spent centuries solving problems by removing obstacles, he said. It appears people are not obstacles. No, Mia said quietly. We are not. From the sitting room came Daniel's voice, clearer than before. Father, can Mia stay today? Adrian looked toward the doorway, then back at her. He did not answer for her. That mattered, more than it should have. Mia stepped into the sitting room. Daniel sat on the couch with a blanket over his knees, pale but alert. The physician looked stunned in the happy, exhausted way doctors did when science had been forced to make room for a miracle. Mia crouched so she was closer to Daniel's height. I can stay today, she said, but I need to go home soon. His face fell. Not forever, sweetheart. I just have a life out there I need to fix before it falls apart. Daniel considered this with grave seriousness. Is it far? About 30 minutes if traffic behaves. Is your home safe? The question was small, but it landed heavily. Mia felt Adrian's attention sharpen. She chose her words carefully. It is mine. That is not the same answer, Daniel said. Mia looked at him, and for a strange second she felt the child had seen through every locked door inside her. Before she could respond, a guard appeared at the end of the hallway. My king, he said, voice tight. There is a man at the outer gate demanding Miss Hayes. He says she belongs to him. The room went utterly still. Adrian's face did not change, but the windows darkened as if a cloud had crossed the sun. Mia's hand closed around her phone. Ryan. The name tasted like old fear and unpaid bills. Daniel reached for her sleeve, exactly where the golden mark cast a faint glow through her skin. Adrian turned to Mia, not the guard, not the physician, not anyone else. What do you want done? It was the first time power had waited for her permission. Mia breathed in. The old Mia would have hidden. Apologized. Explained. Made herself smaller until the danger passed. But the woman standing in Black Estate had watched a cursed child reclaim his voice. She had stood before a council and said her own name. She looked toward the front of the house, where the gates kept the past outside for now. Then she lifted her chin. I want to face him, she said. But this time, I do not want to stand alone. Adrian inclined his head, ancient and solemn. Then you will not. Daniel's fingers tightened once on her sleeve before letting go. As Mia walked toward the entrance beside the Vampire King, she understood the soul mark had not ended her troubles. It had only shown her she was allowed to stop surviving them silently.